Welcome. This online learning is to be completed by StarGuard instructors candidates, new or renewal, prior to attending the in-person sessions of the Instructor Development Course, IDC. Tips for completing the pre-course self-study. 1. You don't have to read everything. Take time to read content that may be new to you and become familiar with where to find the resources you need to conduct a StarGuard course. 2. You can move around the course in any sequence. 3. You must complete each activity, pass each quiz with at least 80%, and answer the instructor agreement questions to successfully complete this pre-course self-study. You may retake the quizzes as many times as you'd like. 4. You can expect to spend between 4 to 8 hours to complete the pre-course self-study, depending on your familiarity with the StarGuard content. Plan ahead so that you are finished before attending the in-person session of your IDC. You can close your course to save your work and come back where you left off at any time. The objectives of the pre-course study are to provide you with a copy of the StarGuard instructor manual for you to read online or download and print. Help you master the cognitive content of the IDC before attending the in-person session, so there will be more time for hands-on activities and helping you become a better facilitator/instructor. Be sure you are familiar with where to find the resources available to you such as program guidelines, training standards, block plans, and instructions for conducting StarGuard experiential activities. Verify that you agree to follow StarGuard instructor best practices. Provide you with access to the StarGuard student textbook so that you can review StarGuard content before your teaching/facilitation assignments. Dashboard, My Courses, Start Course. The required reading for this IDC pre-course study will be presented to you in learning activities within each module. You should also download the entire manual for future reference or to print by using the download arrow in the viewer below. This manual is a new version 22.0. Please read the terms and conditions below before downloading. By downloading the document, you agree to be bound by these terms and conditions. Unless otherwise indicated in writing by StarGuard Elite, SGE grants you the limited right to download, print, photocopy and use the electronic materials subject to the following restrictions. 1. You are prohibited from selling electronic or printed versions of the materials. 2. You are prohibited from distributing to another person any electronic or printed version of the materials. 3. You are prohibited from altering, adapting, revising, or modifying the materials. 4. You are prohibited from creating any derivative works incorporating, in part or in whole, the content of the materials. 5. You are prohibited from downloading the materials and reposting them to any website without written permission from SGE. Any rights not expressly granted herein are reserved by SGE. NAN. 1. Previous module. Dashboard, My Courses, Start Course. Experiential Learning. Experiential Learning. NAN. 1. Previous module. NAN. 1. Previous module. Dashboard, My Courses, Start Course. Experiential Learning. Experiential Learning. Lesson 1 of 5 Principles of Adult Learning. Most of your StarGuard students will likely be teenagers rather than legal adults. However, you are training these young people to bear an adult responsibility, preserving and saving lives. You must set the tone and treat your students as adult learners. Adult learning can be classified into 3 types. Cognitive, kinesthetic, affective. Developing students' knowledge of facts and information is also called cognitive learning. It includes, for example, the ability to state 3 methods of scanning as well as describing in detail the underlying reasons that it is important to scan. Cognitive learning is developed through activities such as reading or online learning. Adults generally retain 10% of what they read, student manuals, 20% of what they hear, instruction, 30% of what they see, illustrations, photos, demonstrations, 50% of what they both see and hear, video, 70% of what they say, discussion, 90% of what they do and say, integrated practice. To maximize your students' retention of what they learn, reduce what you say to key points and accompany that with skill demonstrations, discussion, and integrated practice. Experiential teaching methods are based on the theory that adults learn best in a hands-on setting followed by questioning and reflection of the learning experience. The StarGuard course is specifically designed to help you deliver a concise, effective course that will actively engage your students. Application of adult learning principles to training. Application of adult learning principles to training. Let the learner experience by doing. Make sure each activity has a purpose. Give positive, specific feedback. Guide and prompt. Do not tell. Inform learners of objectives. Use realistic examples. Facilitate experiential activities. Don't just present information. Change the pace and flow. Remove the fear factor. Expect high performance while being supportive. Effective communication for adult learners. When you conduct a StarGuard course, you will communicate with your students both verbally and non-verbally. How well you speak influences your ability to present information verbally. Students will benefit from your strong verbal skills, which must include the ability to do the following: speak clearly, speak loudly, speak at a comfortable pace, speak in short, concise segments when giving directions, keep it simple, humanize your communication with appropriate personal experience, but avoid lengthy war stories, ask open-ended questions to involve your students, listen and facilitate as much as or more than you speak. Your nonverbal communication skills will also influence your effectiveness as an instructor. Students will benefit from the professional attitude you project through your body language and manner. The application of learning and attitude, called effective learning, is the crucial component in getting a learner to perform, execute, or apply knowledge or skills. Consider the example of scanning. It is not enough for a lifeguard trainee to know about scanning or even for that person to be able to demonstrate the skill of turning the head and moving the eyes. Before that person can execute scanning effectively for long periods of time, he or she must learn a sense of responsibility and obligation to apply this knowledge and skill. Further development of the desire to perform to the best of one's ability can, in the case of a lifeguard, mean the difference between life and death. One of your most challenging tasks as a lifeguard instructor will be to instill in your students a sense of responsibility and a desire to perform at a high level. At the beginning of the course, your students may not understand the importance of what they are doing or the consequences of not taking the responsibility seriously. If you find that a student does not respond to the challenge of being treated as an adult learner, this may indicate that she or he does not have the emotional capacity to accept the responsibility of becoming a lifeguard. As an instructor, you have the obligation to evaluate your student's attitude and maturity level and to deny course completion to anyone who does not exhibit behavior that indicates an understanding of the seriousness of lifeguarding. Lesson 2 of 5: Creating a positive atmosphere for learning. The learning atmosphere, also known as the learning climate, refers to all the conditions that affect your students' perceptions of the training. If a climate is perceived to be bad, demeaning, a waste of time, unproductive, boring, uncomfortable, and so on, learning will occur more slowly or not at all. If a climate is perceived to be good, supportive, comfortable, enjoyable, effective, worthwhile, engaging, and so on, learning and participation will be enhanced. To learn more about 3 ways you can create a good learning climate, click on the plus next to each item below. Before the course, to help create a good learning climate, consider taking these actions before the course starts. Send a welcome email or letter to students before training begins. Explain the goals of the training and what to expect, along with a reminder about times, dates, and directions. This communication will immediately begin to set the tone for your training. Distribute student text, print or interactive digital version, and assignments. Conduct an orientation meeting for parents of StarGuard students. This orientation can go a long way toward setting the climate, especially for your younger students, and provide parents with an understanding of expectations. A sample parent orientation outline is included in the appendix. The physical learning environment, outdoor conditions to consider: position yourself so that the sun shines toward you and is at your students' backs. This keeps the sun out of their eyes. Adjust the duration of outdoor and in-water training activity if the conditions are either too cold or too warm. Continuously monitor your students for signs of hypothermia or hyperthermia. If you see signs of either, immediately stop the activity and provide care. Keep insect repellent and sting care supplies readily available in case insects become a problem. Approaches for handling difficult learning environments: encourage your students to adjust your training activity according to the situation. Focus on the positive. Let your students know that you understand their discomfort or frustration. Avoid placing blame on anyone for the situations or conditions. Deal privately with the decision maker who can resolve the problem. If possible, relocate. In a worst-case scenario, cancel and reschedule the session. Greeting and engaging your students. To maintain a good learning atmosphere, get started at a lively pace, involve students immediately. Dress in a professional manner, appropriate for the activity. Maintain good eye contact. Stand relaxed, but with good posture. Stay focused, do one thing at a time. Let students know what to expect. Smile. Be active and enthusiastic. Use creative ways to divide students into pairs or groups. Some ideas for arranging students into pairs or groups: playing cards. Pull from a deck of plastic-coated playing cards the same number of cards as the number of students in the class. Evenly distribute the number of each suit. For example, if you have 12 students, pull out 3 hearts, 3 clubs, 3 diamonds, and 3 spades from the deck. Deal 1 card to each student. The students holding a particular suit form one group. A similar technique is to write the name of each student on a card, shuffle, and deal into groups, or provide an even amount of matching cards to divide into pairs. Candy break, pass around a bucket of different types of candy. Students divide into groups based on the candy chosen, example peppermints, butterscotch, toffee. A similar technique is to pass around a bag of M&Ms, sort by color into the number of students you want in each group. Preferences divide students into 2 groups based on answers to questions about the type of car they drive, music they prefer, and so on. Continue the process until the groups are even. For example, say, I'm going to give you 2 choices. Move to my right if you drive a truck, to my left if you drive a car. Move to my right if your car has 4-wheel drive, to my left if it doesn't. Move to my right if your car is blue, black, or gold. Move to my left if your car is white, red, or yellow. Sit or stand, tell everyone to find a partner. In each pair, one person sits and the other stands. Those standing become one group, those sitting become the second group. Or, tell everyone to stand and cross their arms. Those with the right arm on top become one group, those with the left arm on top become the second group. A similar technique is to ask students to fold their hands together and separate into groups based on which thumb is on top, right or left. Leaders pick 4 leaders, or the number of leaders for the number of groups you want. Pick the leaders using criteria such as those who live closest, or farthest, from the training site, those with the most pets, including fish, those who exercise the most, those who watch the most, or least, TV, and so on. The leaders stand side by side. The other students line up behind the leader of their choice, but each column must contain the same number of students. The groups are determined by which students are in corresponding rows, i.e., all the students who are last in the column become a group and so on. Handshake, round up, students form a circle and count off by 2s. All number 2s step into the circle and turn to face out. Those on the outside of the circle face in. Start clapping or turn on music. When the clapping or music starts, the inside circle walks clockwise, and the outside circle walks counterclockwise. Students shake hands with each person they pass, alternating right hand and left hand. When the music or clapping stops, new partner groups have been formed. This activity can also be conducted in the water, and it is a good lead-up into organized water drills for rescue skills practice. There are also apps available for your mobile device that can help you quickly create randomly assigned groups. One example is TeamMaker, but there are several others. Some ideas for effective seating arrangements. How you arrange the physical environment can also have an impact on the learning experience. Seating arrangements can determine the level of participation you can expect from your students. Facilitation and experiential methods. The following techniques are effective for training lifeguards. Click on the plus next to each to learn more. Debriefing. Debriefing is learning through reflection, and it is a critical component in the learning process for adults. A debriefing should be the last component of every training technique. Your role in debriefing is to guide your students through a reflective process until they discover the learning that took place and that they can use that learning to make beneficial changes. Depending on the training activity, the debriefing may be short, or it may take longer than the activity itself. To conduct a debriefing, ask questions such as these. Did you feel that was successful? Why? What did you do when underscore underscore underscore? How did you feel when underscore underscore underscore? What was challenging for you? What did your group do when underscore underscore underscore? How did you handle underscore underscore underscore? Did you expect underscore underscore underscore? What needs to happen for you to succeed? What will you do to make sure underscore 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 doesn't happen again? What was the highlight for you? What do you think this activity was designed to teach? How will you use this learning? During debriefing, avoid the following: offering answers, comparing one student's actions to another's, giving insincere praise or undue criticism, accepting only one right way, even if another method meets the objective. Demonstration, a demonstration presence of a method for doing something. Demonstrations are useful for the motor skills such as aquatic rescues and CPR that are part of lifeguard training. You may be the demonstrator, or it may be someone else who can perform the skill correctly. To focus your students' attention on the performance, avoid talking and explaining while a demonstration is taking place for the first time. You don't want to create a situation where your students are torn between watching what you are doing or listening to what you are saying. When the demonstration finished, summarize your action steps using specific teaching points. Avoid demonstrations using only gestures or partial movements. For example, simulating opening an airway on an imaginary person rather than demonstrating on a real person or mannequin as you talk through the steps does not provide your students with the modeling they need. If you can't demonstrate the entire skill the way you want your students to perform it, it's usually better to not demonstrate it at all. When giving a demonstration, consider using the whole part whole method. Whole, demonstrate the entire skill, beginning to end, in a slower speed than may be normally used. Part, demonstrate the skill again, briefly naming each step, integrating information and facts while pointing out common errors in technique. Present only the knowledge necessary for the student to adequately perform the skill. Whole, demonstrate the entire skill again, in real time, without comment. Perform it without remarks, interruption, or explanation. This helps students get a feel for the tempo of the skill and the opportunity to observe the sequence of actions before they practice. When conducting a land demonstration for a skill that will be performed in the water, be sure to use a rescue tube and simulate body positions as close to the way they will occur in the water as possible. When you demonstrate an underwater skill on land, have 2 students hold each end of the rescue tube above your head to simulate the surface of the water and where the rescue tube would be positioned during the rescue. Position yourself so that all your students can see your demonstration. You may want to repeat the demonstration from more than one angle, for example, from a front view and then a side view. After a demonstration, direct students into a drill formation to practice. Watch the practice and provide feedback about performance. Role play. During role playing, a small group of students acts out a real-life situation. The actions are not scripted but instead develop into an engaging way of presenting information and stimulating discussion. Role play is effective when you train lifeguards how to administer first aid, enforce rules, manage crowds, deal with patrons, and exhibit professional behavior. One benefit of role playing is that all students participate by either acting or observing. Role playing allows students to experience the consequences of their actions as well as possible reactions from others. Role playing can also help change attitudes. For role playing to be effective, you must do the following: describe the scene clearly so that both observers and participants understand their roles and the situation. Observe the role play and stop it if it gets off task. Debrief by thanking the role play actors and asking how they felt in the roles. Elicit reactions and comments from the observers but protect the actors from negative comments. Ask the observers to frame comments in the form of suggestions on how the situation might have been handled differently. Summarize learning points. Scenario. A scenario is like role-playing. Students assume a role, such as a rescuer or drowning patron, but they actually perform specific actions rather than act them out. For example, a role play of a rescue scene might be conducted in a classroom while imagining they are in a pool, while a scenario of a rescue would be conducted in the pool, with students positioned to respond from locations that mirror real life. Scenario training is critical to developing a lifeguard's ability to put together all types of learning knowledge, skills, and application of learning and attitude to effectively manage an emergency situation. A scenario allows all students to participate by experiencing, thinking, self-critiquing, or critiquing others. A well-constructed scenario allows students to perform in as close to a real-life situation as possible without worrying about the consequences of their actions. A scenario is your best opportunity as an instructor to observe your students using all types of learning. If a student cannot reasonably perform a skill during a scenario, it is unlikely that he or she will be able to perform it on the job. Scenarios provide immediate feedback because students can discover and react on their own. Further debriefing will help clarify for your students what they learned and how this knowledge relates to them. Lecturette. A lecturette is a short, concise communication of key points combined with some type of activity. It is best used to provide specific need-to-know information that will form the foundation for immediate hands-on practice. For example, a lecturette on the function and use of an automated external defibrillator, AED, is appropriate before practicing with the AED. A lecturette is not always a one-way communication from instructor to student like a traditional lecture. A lecturette has an organized structure using the 5-step instructional approach, but sometimes you engage your students in the process by asking questions that prompt them to supply some of the information. For example, rather than saying, "You must shave the chest before applying the pads," ask, "What do you think would happen if I put the pads on this person's hairy chest?" The pads would not stick. So, what has to happen? We need to shave the chest and make sure we have a razor in the responder bag. After each question, your role will be to confirm right answers and to correct misinformation. This acknowledges what your students already know while you present new information. Avoid letting 1 or 2 students monopolize the question and answer exchange. Randomly pick students to provide the answers and try to involve as many as possible. Small group discussion. A small group discussion allows students to share experiences, develop ideas, and solve problems. Small group discussions can develop group cohesion, teamwork, critical thinking, and problem-solving skills. Participants learn from each other and through reflection on their own experience. To facilitate small group discussion, follow these guidelines. Divide your students into small groups. Clearly introduce a specific task or topic to be discussed. For example, asking students to discuss prevention may not be as effective as asking students to discuss ways to reduce injury on specific play features. Provide a deadline. Keep the time allowed short enough to maintain interest, but long enough that each student has a chance to participate. Assign or let each group designate a facilitator who will keep the group on task, a recorder who will write down the ideas generated, and a reporter who will summarize the group's findings for the class. Begin the discussion. Move among the groups to answer questions and make sure that no one is left out because others are dominating the discussion. Reconvene all the groups for a presentation by the reporters. Summarize the common points or themes that the groups discovered or created. Debrief to determine what students learned and how they plan to use it. Experiential activities. An activity should result in a specific outcome. Experiential activities refer to those that allow students to arrive at the outcome on their own through hands-on activity, rather than listening or watching about how to do something. With thought and creativity, almost any element of lifeguard training can be developed into an experiential activity. For example, lifeguards must understand prevention strategy. Rather than using a show-and-tell technique to teach lifeguards prevention strategy, this is our safety equipment, here are the pool rules, etc., think about how your students could discover prevention strategies for themselves. One example is the walkabout experiential activity described in Section 5. If you evaluate each aspect of your training by asking, "How can my students learn this for themselves?" you will be able to develop new and engaging training activities. Specific experiential activities built into the StarGuard curriculum can be found in your StarGuard instructor manual and later in this course. Drills. The first step in planning drills is to make sure that all the equipment you need is readily available. Next, plan how many people will be in each group for each drill and which technique you will use to separate your students into these groups. Finally, give students clear directions on where to go, how many people should be in each group, how the drill will be conducted, and how many times they should practice before moving or changing. Drills conducted in the water require additional organization and planning. When your students are in the water, it will be more difficult for you to communicate, especially to the whole class at once. To make the most of your water time, do the following: keep students moving and involved. Set up drills that keep the most students active at a time, with minimal wait time between turns. Design drills so that your students practice with many different people and body types. Eliminate actions that waste time from your drills. For example, once your students have mastered the entry and approach stroke, the time spent swimming to the person, back to the wall, and climbing out before starting can be reduced. Have students start from, and remain in, the water during the drill. Have students complete several trials, preferably 5, of the same skill before introducing a new skill. Watch the drill and provide brief performance feedback to students individually, or stop the drill and address the group if you are noticing something that most need to improve. When possible, set up experiences so that your students will figure out how to perform a skill on their own with your facilitation. Provide the objective rather than being told how to perform. In most cases, your students will, on the first try, perform in a manner that meets the objectives. The feedback you provide from this point forward can focus on the finer performance points. Suggested drill formations can be found in your StarGuard instructor manual. Tips for conducting a scenario when possible. Place all the necessary equipment and people where they would be located in a real situation. This step is crucial for evaluating the effectiveness of logistics as well as performance. Prep the person who is simulating an ill, injured, or unresponsive person on what to expect during the scenario as well as how to act in the most realistic way possible for the situation. Identify the roles of the students in the scenario, such as who will make the water rescue, who will serve as backup lifeguards. Introduce the goals and rules and the safety considerations, such as refraining from actually breathing into the person simulating being unresponsive or pressing down on the chest during CPR. Facilitate the scenario by providing cues after actions are performed, such as when the rescuer checks a pulse after a breath is given, or when you want to insert a change in the person's condition such as vomiting. Provide cues by describing what the person would see or experience during a real event. For example, rather than, the person has a pulse, or, the airway is not open, use, you feel an obvious pulse, or, you do not see the chest rise. Debrief the scenario by first asking the participants to evaluate themselves. Then summarize the learning points and relate how this information can be used in the future. Attributes of an effective instructor/facilitator: teaches often, has good people skills, manages time effectively, objectively evaluates students, properly documents the course, has adequate subject knowledge, understands adult learning styles, intelligent, ethical, and dependable, understands the experiential approach, has an appropriate, professional appearance, has demonstrated competency in essential skills, motivated, well-prepared, self-confident and patient, understands the importance of safety and risk management, can effectively use problem-solving scenarios as teaching tools. Lesson 4 of 5. Are you a good facilitator? Facilitating a well-designed and appropriate experiential activity is an effective method of helping students learn and be able to understand how the concepts will apply in real life. Suggested experiential activities to have in your instructor toolbox are provided in Section 5. Adults learn best when they feel physically and emotionally comfortable in a training situation and are led by an effective facilitator. When you are a facilitator, you guide students to learning. A facilitation approach is student-centered, not teacher-centered. Consider the following differences. Drag the card at the top to the type of facilitator it describes. Describe the reason for learning and provide need-to-know information. Lecturing into nice-to-know content will reduce skill practice time and should be avoided. Demonstrate the skill. High-quality performance is essential when demonstrating a skill because students will tend to copy it. When giving a demonstration, consider using the whole part whole method. For water skills, demonstrate parts that can't be seen in the water on land when possible, as well as in the water. Direct students to practice. Explain how the practice session will be organized and where to go. Step 4. Drill. Allow adequate time for students to practice their skills. Conduct an organized drill, or break students into small groups with the required equipment for the practice. Depending upon the skill being presented, and the experience of students, small groups can be set up as peer learning/coaching, role-playing, or problem-based scenario learning. Step 5. Debrief. Use techniques to ask for, and answer, questions as briefly and concisely as you can. Consider finishing with a short problem-solving scenario to help students process key concepts. Summary. When students are working in small groups, you should circulate through the area, answering questions, evaluating performance, correcting errors in technique, and providing constructive feedback and positive reinforcement. Avoid anxiety-producing, perfection-oriented skill checks. A stimulating, but non-threatening environment is best for learning. Obtaining feedback. A big part of being a facilitator is knowing how to ask the right questions. Have you ever been in a situation in which everyone in the room stays silent when you ask, "Does anyone have any questions?" at the end of a training session? Instead, try asking the following: what do I need to clarify? What have I forgotten? How can I help you use this information? These questions shift the responsibility for not knowing something to you, and your students will be much more likely to respond. When a student requests clarification, validate and affirm the question, then repeat it if necessary, for the whole group. For example, "That's a great question, the question is." Or, "It's interesting that you ask that." Tim posed the question. Asking open-ended questions is another effective method for engaging students. These questions cannot be answered by yes or no and usually start with the words "what do you," "why do you think," "how will you," "how can you," "what if," "what has been," or "what are some." Lesson 5 of 5 Facilitator Challenges. Every experienced instructor knows that conducting lifeguard courses is highly dynamic. No two proceed the same. The curriculum is the only constant. The teaching environment and the students both can create new and challenging situations. Read your StarGuard Instructor Manual pages 25 to 30 to learn how to manage these potential challenges. Code taking, managing students' diversity, managing difficult students, dealing with questions.